Now pull your chair a little closer, because I want to tell you about a young man who learned that the life he wanted was hiding behind a door he kept refusing to open. And that door, it opened before the sun came up. I read a book a while back by a fellow named Robin Sharma called The 5 a.m. Club. And I'll be honest with you, when I first picked it up, I rolled my eyes. Another morning routine book? Please. But Sharma said something in there that stuffed me cold. He said the greatest men and women who ever walked this earth, the composers, the inventors, the saints, nearly every last one of them rose before the world did. Before the noise, before the crowd, before the phone could ring. They took that first hour of the day and made it holy. And Sharma said, that hour is the hour your whole life turns on. And the moment I read that, I thought of a story my own grandfather used to tell me. A story from old Japan, 400 years old, about a young samurai named Kaito. Kaito was 17, lean as a willow, quick as a fox, and absolutely convinced he was the most talented young swordsman in the province. And you know what? He probably was. That was the problem. He'd been sent to a mountain dojo run by an old master named Hiroshi. And at that dojo, the bell rang at the hour of the tiger. Now, if you don't know, the hour of the tiger in old Japan was 4 in the morning to 6 in the morning. Before the roosters, before the cooks, before even the monks in the valley temple lit their lamps. That's when the bell rang. And every student, every single one, had to be on the training ground by dawn. Sword drills in the half-dark, then seated silence, then a brush and a pot of ink. Move, then stillness, then ink on paper. Before the sun was fully up, every student had trained his body, quieted his mind, and shaped a single character in calligraphy. Every single day. Kaito hated it. He hated the cold. He hated the way his feet numbed on the packed earth floor. He hated that bell like it was a personal enemy. And most of all, he hated a senior student named Renjiro. Renjiro was already there. Every morning, sword in hand, breath steady. By the time Kaito stumbled out of the bunkhouse, rubbing his eyes, Renjiro had already finished 20 minutes of drills and was sitting in zazen like a stone. The boy was not more talented than Kaito. Kaito knew it in his bones. But Renjiro had something Kaito didn't have. Renjiro had owned the hour of the tiger for 3 years. And the inciting moment, here it comes, came on a foggy spring morning. The master announced an open sparring match. Every student paired up. Kaito drew Renjiro. Kaito had stayed up late the night before, drinking tea, sharpening theories, convinced that natural talent would carry him through. And in front of the whole dojo, in front of the master, in front of every student, Renjiro knocked Kaito's bakken clean out of his hands. 3 times. 3 passes. 3 disarms. Kaito walked back to the bunkhouse with his face burning and his pride in pieces. That night, he did what any stubborn young man does. He made a plan. He'd wake up earlier. He'd train harder. He'd crush Renjiro by the next full moon. He set his mind like a nail. And the next morning, he slept through the bell. Because here's the thing Sharma writes about in that book, and it's the thing that nobody warns you about. Rising before dawn is not a decision you make once. It's a decision you make every single morning, against every fiber of a body that wants to roll over and disappear into the pillow. Sharma calls that first hour the victory hour. Not because it's easy, because it's won. Every morning, by choosing. Kaito had not yet learned to choose. Master Hiroshi didn't yell at him.
That was the terrifying part. The old man just walked with him one morning, slow steps along the gravel path, and said this: "Kaito, you believe the blade is the sword you carry. It is not. The blade is the man. And the man is forged in the hour before the world wakes. Every master before you, in every land, in every age, they all knew this. The ones whose names you will never know even remembered them by. They all rose before the sun. They did not find time for their craft. They made time while the world slept." Kaito nodded, because what else do you do when the master talks like that? But he did not yet believe it. And for weeks, he kept losing the small war. Some mornings he'd make it to the ground. Most mornings he wouldn't. And Renjiro? Renjiro was always there. Always. Like a man married to the dawn.
Then one morning, and you know how it is with these things, it's never the big dramatic day. It's always a random Tuesday. Kaito dragged himself up at 4. Just once. Just to see. And he stood on that training ground with his breath fogging the air and nobody watching him. No master, no rival, no crowd. Just him and a wooden sword and the 20 minutes before the others arrived. He swung. He corrected. He swung again. And something happened that he did not expect. He felt awake. Not just awake, something deeper, like a part of him that had been asleep for 17 years had finally cracked one eye open. That morning, he stayed for the whole hour. 20 minutes with the sword. 20 minutes sitting still in zazen, breathing like the master taught, his mind slowly settling like silt in a jar. And then 20 minutes at the low table with a brush and a pot of ink, copying a single character. The character for patience, over and over. Sharma has a formula for exactly this hour. 20 minutes of movement, 20 minutes of reflection, 20 minutes of growth. He calls it the 20-20-20. And he says, if you can just give your first hour over to those 3 things, move the body, quiet the mind, feed the soul with something that makes you better, your whole life starts to rearrange itself. Quietly, without fanfare, from the inside out. Kaito didn't know the formula had a name, but the dojo had been teaching it for 400 years.
Now here comes the hard part, because everybody skips over the valley in stories like this, and I won't. For about 3 weeks, Kaito kept the hour, and nothing changed. Renjiro still disarmed him in practice. His calligraphy still looked like a drunk crow had walked across the paper. His mind in meditation still spun like a wheel in mud. And one morning, sitting in the cold with his legs aching and his sword arm shaking, Kaito thought, what is the point of this? I am no better. I am just more tired. Sharma writes about this exact place. He says this is the moment most people quit, because the mind wants the result, but the body and the soul work on their own calendar. He says the first 3-4 weeks of the new hour feel like pushing a boulder up a mountain with your bare hands. And he says, push anyway, because the growth is happening underground, where you cannot see it. Like a farmer who plants seed and stares at dirt for a month before anything pokes through. Kaito pushed anyway, not because he believed, because he was too tired to argue with himself anymore. And then there was the other thing the master taught, and this is the part people miss. After every training block, Kaito was made to rest. Really rest. Not scroll, not scheme. They didn't have phones, thank heavens. But they had their own distractions. The master said the tiger is fierce because the tiger sleeps. A blade wears down if you grind it all day. The man who trains without recovery doesn't grow. He cracks. So between the hard mornings came long afternoons of tea and silence. Walks along the pine ridge, a nap in the sun. The dojo breathed like a heartbeat. Strain, rest. Strain, rest. And somewhere in that rhythm, something in Kaito started to grow that you cannot grow any other way. 6 months later, the master called another open sparring match. Kaito drew Renjiro. Of course he did. And the whole dojo gathered around the ring like they had that first time. And this time, Kaito stepped onto the sand and he did not think about winning. He did not think about Renjiro. He did not think about his pride. His mind was like water in a still bowl. Because he had sat in silence at 5:20 in the morning for 180 mornings in a row. Renjiro moved first. Kaito flowed. Renjiro struck. Kaito answered. And for the first time in his life, Kaito did not lose. He didn't win either. They fought to a standstill. 3 passes, 3 draws. Renjiro stepped back, bowed deep, and said 4 quiet words. The tiger is yours. Kaito bowed back, and in that bow, he understood something the master had been whispering for half a year. The man who wins the hour of the tiger does not need to beat anyone. He has already beaten the one opponent who ever mattered: himself. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this one. What's the first thing you do when your eyes open in the morning? Is it the thing that builds you? Or is it the thing that feeds a life you don't even want? Because that first hour, Sharma says it in the book, and 400 years of Mountain Dojo said it long before him. That first hour is where your whole life is quietly decided. Not in the big moments, in the dark ones, before anyone is watching. You can read The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma if you want all of it. The formula, the science, the stories of every great man and woman who rose before the sun and became who they were meant to be. It's a strange book. Part novel, part manifesto. But the bones of it are as old as the hour of the tiger. Own your morning. Elevate your life. If this story stirred something in you, and I have a feeling it did, hit that like button. Subscribe. Come on back, because I'll always have another story waiting. And pick up Sharma's book. Read it slow. Read it before sunrise, if you're brave. Because the world will be loud when it finally wakes. But the blade, the real blade, is always forged in the quiet hour before. Until next time, own the dawn, and the day will bow to you.